that's the structure for this evening. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Padmavajra to you, because some of you will know Padmavajra really well and been friends with Padmavajra for many, many years. Other people have never encountered Padmavajra before, so it'd be helpful to say a bit about him. So Padmavajra was ordained in 1976 by Bodhichitta as a teenager. So all of his adult life he's been ordained an order member of the Triratna Buddhist order. And so he spent his entire adult life serving Buddhism, really, serving the Three Jewels, serving Sanghas, trying to build Sanghas, build buildings at times. That's taken him to Croydon, to the London Buddhist Centre, to India at times. And the last 30 years, he's been based at Padmavajra Retreat Centre. And that's where he's been at the centre of training men to join the order. So he's been involved in the lives of many, many, many men who have been training, myself included, all the male order members here this evening, helping us train for ordination at Padmavajra. And Padmavajra is a special place. So hopefully you'll get a chance to go there. They have open days, so people aren't men can go there as well. So we'll take more about that. So Padmavajra is, in a way, you're going to encounter Padmavajra, so you'll get a flavour of what Padmavajra is like. So Padmavajra is a lot of responsibilities, and he's been a big influence on me personally. He's been a big influence on this Buddhist centre. He's been the president of our centre for at least the last 10 years. And the big reason why we're such a vibrant, active, big Sangha is because of Padmavajra's influence. So he's had a big influence on this centre, on me personally. He's had a big influence on our order and our movement. So the last 2 years, when we've all been locked down, Padmavajra was giving talk after talk after talk to encourage people, give them confidence and inspire them throughout these unprecedented times. And a particular strong set of talks was on the Bodhichitta avatar, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life by Shantideva. And that's our series on the stages, the verses of the Buddha have come out of that text, come out of Shantideva. So if you haven't watched that series, you can watch that on YouTube. Very, very powerful series of talks that Padmavajra gave. So for me, the image that came to mind is the Buddha sometimes was talked of as I think like a flag bearer, a standard bearer, someone who would, if you're in, people might not like this metaphor, but I do. If you're in a battle, you'd look up and you'd see the flag and you'd know everything was okay. And Padmavajra is like that for me. It's like a beacon or a flag bearer. Like you just, Padmavajra visit Sheffield and everything's okay, or there's a pandemic and everything's falling apart, but Padmavajra is there like a rock teaching the Dharma at Padmavajra. So, much more I could say, but I want to make sure I leave time. Please give a big round of applause to Padmavajra.
Thanks very much, Bodhinaga. It's wonderfully generous introduction, but I come twice a year, but I haven't been for 2 years, so I don't think the vibrancy of the Sheffield Buddhist Centre has a huge amount to do with me. I think it's the collective efforts of everybody, and it's I don't know. It's very, very good to be back in the Sheffield Buddhist Centre. I've missed coming. Big part of my life coming twice a year, so I've really missed it, and I find it very, very stimulating coming to the centre. There's so much going on here, and as Bodhinaga says, I live in Padmavajra. I live in a retreat centre, so coming into an urban centre is incredibly important to see how the Dharma is taught and communicated and lived out in a very, very different context to the one that I'm used to. I could go on and on about being in Sheffield, but it is great to be in Sheffield because I've always said how much I love Sheffield as a city as well as the centre. But I'd better get on with the talk. So you're doing this really good thing of going through the stages, the 7 devotional moods, Sankaracharya has called them, of the 7-fold puja, the Anuttara puja, the supreme worship. And I'm sure the context has been set for that, but just to remind myself of the context, it comes from a section, actually the general heading is Confession of Faults, but the Confession of Faults, well, it's two sections, Confession of Faults and gathering the Bodhicitta or accepting Bodhicitta. And it's a massive puja, a massive puja, a massive devotional set of devotional verses. It's very, very significant, the opening of it, because Shantideva says, in order to embrace or gather up, the word is parigraha in Sanskrit, which has a number of translations, but perhaps gather up might be the best, or embrace, or even accept the Bodhicitta. I offer spotless worship to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So I think this is very, very significant. The way I read it, Shantideva, the composer of these verses, has had some encounter with what's called the Bodhicitta. This, if you like, force of wisdom and compassion, which make up the essence of the enlightened mind. That sort of, as it were, erupted in his life. That's the impression you get from the earlier chapters. His life is turned around. He's seeing things entirely differently. He's not now just committed to gaining enlightenment. He's committed to gaining enlightenment for the benefit of each and every living being. This is kind of an unimaginable state of consciousness, I think. But he's very concerned that he doesn't lose connection with that. And the rest of the text is all about how do you live from that. And the first thing he does is worship. The first thing he does is praise and celebrate and give thanks. This is very, very important. And the verses that you looked at last week, the verses of worship, are really all about adorning with great beauty the embodiments of that enlightened consciousness, that bodhicitta. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are sort of crystallizations of this mind of wisdom and compassion, this force of wisdom and compassion. And he wants to adorn them. He loves this bodhicitta so much, the response is to adorn. Sangharakshita was once criticized for writing in very flowery prose about the Dharma, and he was talking to a friend of his about it in India, and this friend said to him, "That which you love, you adorn." It's a lovely phrase, and it's true, isn't it? When we love somebody very, very much, if we really love them, we want to adorn them, don't we? We just want to beautify them as much as we possibly can, and the same is true in the spiritual life. So those lovely verses that you heard last week, offering up flowers and lamps and incense and perfumes and all beautiful things. It's all about opening up to the beauty of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas so that you can open to their influence, so that you can take them in. This week there's a kind of shift with Vandana or salutation or prostration. It's as if what's going on here is that Shantideva is seeing that, yes, the ideal is beautiful, highly desirable. You really want to go there. And then you realize, my goodness, this spiritual ideal of the bodhicitta, these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are just vast and sublime and awe-inspiring. You know, it's like when you go out to the peak and you go out to climb a mountain and you turn a corner and you see the summit of a mountain. And, there's that awe-inspiring feeling before you even start going on the climb. You realize, my goodness, that is a really big mountain and I am very, 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 very small. This is a very, very important experience, actually, that we are dwarfed, if you like, in relation to the spiritual ideal, that it is definitely higher and greater and deeper than ourselves. So the verses really reflect this. As many atoms as there are in the 1,000 million worlds, so many times I make reverent salutation. as many atoms as there are. So imagine all the atoms that make up this entire, well, not just our world. I mean, this is the 1,000 million worlds, the 1,000 world system, as it's sometimes called, all the atoms. This way of, this vision of worship, of salutation, comes from a sutra called the Avatamsaka Sutra, Gandhavyuha Sutra, and comes from a very famous aspiration of a bodhisattva named Padmavajra. And Padmavajra does this worship of the Buddhas, and he imagines himself as being every atom, doing prostrations to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Only that is enough to express your veneration, your reverence, your salutation for this vast, sublime spiritual ideal. And you can even do this when you're doing these pujas. Those of you who recite this regularly, you can imagine that they instruct you, well, imagine, multiple versions of yourself filling up the entire universe, making prostrations to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So you can see from this that the whole idea here is to really expand our consciousness. That's another thing that's going on here. There's this great expansion of consciousness. You have to bring that to this stage of the puja, just this expansion of yourself. And like I say, this is all part of bringing the bodhicitta into your life more fully. This is very important. Many people have what we can loosely call spiritual experiences. Many people have those times in their life where something opens up. I think somebody once said, I think it was William James, was it, that many people have spiritual experiences, very few make it the center of their lives. And what this is doing is making it the center of your life. You're deciding that opening to something higher, I need to revere, I need to look up to, I need to treat it with respect, I need to cherish it. Because if you don't, you lose it. You squander it. You get distracted from it. So it's worthy of your salutation, worthy of bowing your head in relation to it. So many times I make reverent salutation. I can't remember the Sanskrit. I mean, salutation is probably pranam or vandana. But the word reverent is very interesting. It's not a word that we perhaps like too much. If we hear the word reverend, it might not have quite the right associations for us. Revere is a bit different. When we say, oh, well, I revere that person or that thing, that's a bit different. But it's quite good to look at the Sanskrit of the word that's usually translated as revere. It's Gaurava in Sanskrit, Gaurava in Pali. The etymology is very interesting. Gaurava means that which is weighty, that which is weighty, that which has weight for you, that which has a kind of gravitas for you in your life. It's weighty with qualities. Etymologically, it's related to the word guru. A true guru is somebody weighty with qualities. That's why you would revere a teacher, because they have genuine qualities that you can look up to. So you revere that which you've learned, through experience, through being around things, being around people, having an ideal alive in your life. It has a real sort of weighty presence for you. So you treat it with respect. There's a famous sutta in the Pali text called the Gaurava Sutta, where the Buddha, even after his enlightenment, wants to revere. He wants to look up, and he can't find anybody who's beyond him in terms of enlightenment. So he decides to revere the Dhamma that he's discovered. If you like, he decides that for the rest of his days, he's going to revere and rely upon, he says, that reality itself, if you like. It's not the Dhamma in the form of teachings. So this is very, very significant that if you like, revering, if you like, is what they call in the old text dharmata. It's the natural way of things. Sometimes people find it very hard to look up because perhaps we associate it with very negative ideas of authority or something like that, or we might feel that we've been forced to look up, or maybe we've had so many disappointments of people who we've sort of trusted, who we've looked up to, and then we discover that, well, yes, they do have feet of clay or something like that. And we can even get a bit cynical about that. And that's a great shame, because I think there's something in human beings that sort of longs to revere, longs to look up, longs to feel that there is something greater than them, that we're not just on this sort of flat plane, as it were, that there are states of consciousness and maybe even people and maybe even beings who are greater than us, that can, it's not a fixed hierarchy, if you want to use that word, that we can aspire to and move towards. So as many atoms as there are in the 1,000 million worlds, so many times I make reverent salutation. The cosmic theme continues to all the Buddhas of the 3 eras. So again, we're sort of blowing our kind of cosmology apart in this stage of the puja. We're not just learning how to revere, but we're also totally expanding our ideas of what is. In Buddhist tradition, there's this idea that the arising of Buddhas is a sort of regular event in the workings of the cosmos. That in dim and distant, almost primordial ages in the past, there was many beings who rediscovered the way to enlightenment and revealed it. Yes, there have been periods of great darkness, but in the past, there are Buddhas. In the present, there are Buddhas. And the future, there will be Buddhas. It's an incredibly optimistic vision of life, an incredibly hopeful vision of life. I mean, these days, we can get into that mood, kind of understandably, of how dismal things seem. That there's so many awful things going on, and of course the news media, really perpetuate that for us. And the future can seem really dismal, and the present can seem dismal. And sometimes when we look at our past, we don't fancy that too much either. But in a way, what this is doing, whether or not this is all myth, it's in a sense poetry, but it doesn't mean it's a fib. It's not sort of scientifically provable or anything like that. We're not in that plane. If you're going to do the puja, you have to be a poet. You have to be an artist, if you like, if you want to do a puja properly. But it's trying to shift entirely your way of relating to your past, to your present, and to your future. That's the way I sort of internalize all this. I can get into moods where I kind of look back and think, well, that wasn't very good, and that wasn't very good, and you really messed that up, and this, that, and the other. And I think, yeah, but hang on. Look at the really, really good things going on in your life right now. Right now, the incredible friends you have, the Dharma you have. You must have done something right. There must have been things in your past, and I know people who've had really, really tough pasts, but there must have been something really, really good there. There must have been that potentiality for Buddhahood manifesting in your past. So it's very, very important to look for that. And yes, you can also look to the future as well. This is looking at it in terms of you just want to revere enlightenment wherever it's manifest. You're sort of going out of time as well as your usual ideas of space. But I think that has a kind of impact on the whole way we relate to our past, present, and future, right now. So to all the Buddhas of the 3 eras, to the Saddharma, the true Dharma, the true teaching. And really, I think what Shantideva has in mind here, it's not just the Dharma as teachings and practices and texts and words and even imagery. It's the lokuttara. We usually translate that as the transcendental, that which is beyond the world, beyond all of your ideas of what life is. The Dharma as the profound and the sublime, the Gambhira Dharma, as it's called, the deep Dharma, the vast deeps of the Dharma. So you're revering, this dimension of things. So to really revere, you've got to have a sort of feel, even a sort of glimpse of that beyond the Dharma in the deepest sense. I mean, it's said in some Mahayana sutras that the highest wisdom practice of the most advanced bodhisattvas, so these are those, they're right on the edge of enlightenment, their greatest practice, their highest wisdom practice is to continually revere the Buddhas. That's what they do. Revere, praise, salute, worship the Buddhas. That's the highest wisdom practice. It's as if they can see them. They can see that dimension of things. They can intuit that. And the response is to revere, not to, go up into the head about it and have all sorts of discussions about attainment and all that kind of thing. No, you bow down. You bow down. You bow down in relation to that. What do they call it? The mysterium tremendum. That in Christian mysticism, that sense of the sublime reality, to the Saddharma and to the excellent community. I think this is a translation of Arya Sangha. So this is we're used to talking about the Sangha as us, and I know very, very well how positive the Sheffield Buddhist Centre Sangha is. In all its senses, the order members, the mitras, the friends coming along, very, very positive. But it's actually the Arya Sangha, the Sangha made up of those who are irreversible and beyond that we revere, those towering spiritual beings that we revere. In a way, unless we're doing that, we can't really call this a Sangha. We're a Sangha to the extent that we're in contact with that higher, greater Sangha of those who are definitively on the path. So that the opening verses then, we're entering this very, very sublime world of salutation and reverence. And like I say, you really have to try and enter this mood in the puja, kind of visualize it as you recite the verses. But then it sort of changes to the very kind of concrete, really. I really like this about it, because the next verse begins, I pay homage to all the shrines. And the word for shrines is chaitya. So Shantideva he doesn't just want to revere the sort of, in the cosmic sense, he's also going to revere those structures, those objects in his immediate environment in 8th century India, which are the sort of physical embodiments of everything he's been worshipping, as it were, in his mind. So chaityas are shrines with the Buddha. You've got, this is a chaitya. This is, we pay homage to this shrine, but it's the expression of the, if you like, that vastness that we talked about in the first verse. There's also a special chaitya that sort of appeared since I was last here in the Remembrance Garden. This beautiful sort of sanctuary that's been created. No, it's that way, isn't it? With that lovely, I presume it must be Yorkshire stone, chaitya stupa that's been created, in which a portion of Dada Rinpoche's relics have been enshrined, and it also contains the ashes of Susiddhi, the first chairman of the centre, and Dharmapadita, very great order member, who's very much a part of the Sangha. And it's so beautiful, that area that's been created This is a very, very sacred site now. I mean, it already was, but it's even more so because you've got the relics of a living Bodhisattva, Dada Rinpoche, Sangharakshita's teacher, who gave Sangharakshita the Bodhisattva vows. So this is a real sort of pilgrimage place now. If Tibetans knew about it, you'd have them coming in, prostrating, and all that kind of thing. So you revere the sort of the concrete symbols of the three jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And that's very, very important. It's very important that we have reminders of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, physical reminders. At Padmavajra, we have a stupa with Dada Rinpoche's relics in them as well. And we have this shrine room, which is, becoming a sort of pilgrimage place because it's so unusual, filled with Buddha images and so on. I think shrines are incredibly important. I think people want shrines. I think people, you notice that thing, where there've been road accidents and, or sometimes or where there've been accidents on pathways and things like that. People want to remember the person there. I think this is really important that we have these places of memory. But these are shrines which are the embodiment of our ideals to remind us of, what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. And places in which the Bodhisattvas have been. Well, this goes back to a tradition in India, which is the Bodhisattva here is the Buddha's previous lives. Apparently, there were shrines in India in Buddhism's heyday, which were places associated with the Buddha's previous lives. This might sound a bit strange for us. So there's a shrine where the Buddha gave his body to a hungry tigress, for example. There's a shrine where he was the preacher of patience who was cut to pieces by a vengeful king, and so on and so forth. So in that world, the whole landscape is, describing a journey, a bodhisattva's journey. It's very hard for us to relate to that. I mean, perhaps in centuries to come, there'll be this sort of incredible discovery that at one time, a great Buddhist teacher like Padmasambhava actually came to Britain. And actually there'll be all these shrines discovered all over the Peak District where he converted the local deities, and we'll all be able to go on pilgrimages. But that's for future lives, and it sounds fantastic. But actually it's not so far distant from us. There's still that vestige of associations of place with sanctity. There's Glastonbury, for example, Glastonbury Tor. It has a kind of sanctity to it. There's a wonderful poem that Sangharakshita wrote called On Glastonbury Tor. A wonderful poem. It's clearly a journey, of a kind of a Buddhist going into, all this ancient kind of Celtic mythology and all sorts of visions arising on that journey. And lots of places like that. I've noticed there's this new thing, isn't there? It's probably been going for a long time. Pilgrimage paths. There's a whole movement now in Britain of people wanting to follow the old pilgrimage paths, the old shrines. So we want to have places which we can go to, where we can connect with something higher. And and I think places develop a kind of sanctity. I think, I hear people tell me that the Buddhist center coming here does something to them. Their consciousness changes coming into this place, not just because there's a Buddha image, it's because people practice here, practice the Dharma here, and, relate to each other very, very positively here, and coming into this place lifts them up. Well, that's worthy of our salutation. It's worthy of cherishing, worthy of, in a sense, looking up to. And then he says, I make profound obeisance to the teachers, the spiritual friends. This is again a very important traditional practice, that your spiritual teacher, your spiritual friend is really important. They might not be fully enlightened or anything like that. They might not be very advanced, but they're worthy of even the profoundest reverence, because they're the ones that have connected you with the Dharma. They're the ones that have connected you with a living spiritual life. They're the ones perhaps who even exemplify for you the quality of revering itself. I think it's very interesting being a disciple of Sangharakshita, and sometimes people have asked me, oh, do you think Sangharakshita was enlightened? Do you think he's an advanced bodhisattva? I said, I haven't got a clue. I have no idea of my teacher's attainment, and I'm not in the slightest bit interested in it. It really doesn't bother me at all. What I do know is he's had a profound effect on my life. And one of the things I really, really cherish and value and revere about my teacher is that I knew that he revered the Buddha and that he revered his teachers very deeply. I remember one time having a discussion with him, a few of us, and it was a time in our movement where people were really into Buddha nature, in the sort of hardcore sense that in some weird way, you're enlightened already, but you just haven't noticed it. There's been some catastrophic mistake, but really you're enlightened and you've just got to let go and notice your enlightenment. So he was asked about this, what he thought about this. He said, well, the idea of Buddha nature as potential, that we have the potential to become enlightened, I really agree with. He said, but then he sort of shook his head and said, but the idea that we have all of the qualities and all of the powers of the fully enlightened Buddha already within us, he said, no, I don't think that. And I really had a sense of somebody who really revered the Buddha, who really had a sense of who the Buddha really was. And there was no way on earth he was going to sort of arrogate that to himself, appropriate that to himself. So one of the things, I really, why I revere my teacher is because of his own, highly developed sense of reverence, the way he could look up. And in that looking up, you had a real sense of, strangely, the presence of the Buddha. And then the last verse, I make profound obeisance to the teachers and those to whom respectful salutation is due. Those to whom respectful salutation is due. I think this is really important that we respect and revere those who are worthy of it. But I remember a solitary retreat I was doing, and doing the puja assiduously and really paying attention to the words. I realized, well, that's kind of everybody, strangely. That was the way I was sort of relating to it. Certainly all my friends, all the people I knew, all my, everybody I was in contact with, there's something in them that is worthy of respectful salutation. We have sort of funny ideas in the West about, prostrating and bowing and revering. Perhaps it's left over from sort of theistic religion. And sometimes people say, well, I'm not going to bow down to that person. I'm not going to do that. And I remember my Indian friends, being with my friends in India, when I traveled to a village with my Indian friends, we were on a lecture tour or something like that. And some of my Indian friends were, they had very good jobs in the civil service, quite high government officers, very well educated. And they'd come to their village, and the first thing they'd do when they got to their home was that they'd prostrate to their mother and father. They'd bow down and they'd take the dust from the feet of their parents. Brett is nodding. And they'd also do that with village elders, uncles, aunts. Some of these people have been illiterate. Their old school teacher, their Guruji. And it completely changed my idea of what the expression of respect really means. All those people that have helped them, all of those people that sort of, have kind of brought them into the world and brought them into the human community. they're all worthy of respect. They're all worthy of salutation. And I thought this is a mark of a superior culture, I think, when you to that extent, when you see that valuing of people in that way. And you do get it in the West. I remember seeing that documentary of Ian Wright, the footballer, who played for Arsenal in England. And he had this school teacher who, he didn't have a good relationship with his dad, I don't think. I think he said that. But he had this school teacher who really encouraged him to play football. And, really, really encouraged him. And in this film, the school teacher came and patted him on the shoulder and introduced him. And Ian Wright just burst into tears. And he just, I love that man. I love that man. And this old boy, he said, the proudest day of my life was seeing you running out for England. And there was gratitude, there was respect. It was so inspiring. So it is there. It is there in us. We want to do that. Perhaps we need to do that. So there we are. That's a little exploration of Vandana. You know, we've gone from the sort of cosmic, transcendental heights right down, you know, to the human. It's all there. I think this is very important, in our Buddhist practice. We have the sort of vastness and the profound, but then it must come down to the particular and the people around us. So thank you. Hang on, 8:10. Well, no, it's 8:11 actually. So I think we're going to have a break now, aren't we? So we don't have very long, but if there are any questions that you'd like to ask, or things you'd like to say, we've got about 20 minutes or so to do that. It was my idea to do it like this rather than going to groups, because I just wanted to be with as many people as possible. So, but Danya, blame me for changing things. It's my weakness, yeah. So anything.
Well, we've had a question from Sharam on Zoom, and he asks, are salutations and prostration to Bodhisattvas and Bodhicittas and the shrines the same as idolization?
That's a very good question, because I suppose what would it mean? What would idolization in the sense of turning them into idols? Is it IDOL?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in Buddhist tradition, that the objects of veneration are not seen in themselves as the Buddha. Do you see what I mean? It's not that the Buddha image behind me, there is a fully enlightened Buddha in that image, or that image is that. It's a reminder of the ideal of enlightenment. So I think that's not turning it into an idol, to use that word. It's more that you're trying to, it's helping you through a concrete image to relate to all of the qualities of enlightenment. I think what this brings up is this point that personhood is our highest human category, because we're persons, and we are extremely important to ourselves. I know we might not like to admit it, but we are. You know, even if we might give ourselves a hard time, as a person, we really cherish our personhood. So to turn enlightenment, as it were, into a person is to endow enlightenment with that which you cherish more than anything else. And this is the argument you could put forward, if you like, for images of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, because it's endowing the ideal, it's taking it out of the abstract into something that you can relate to in the form of what is most important to you, something like a human being. So that, I don't think that's turning it into an idol. It's more like, how can I say, it's more like, I think it's just incredibly important that we take these things like enlightenment and nirvana and all these things out of abstraction into something that you can definitely relate to. After all, there is no such thing as enlightenment. There's only enlightened beings. There's no such thing as Buddhism. There's only Buddhists, people practicing Buddhism. So that's why we have all the imagery. Yeah. I should just say there's a very important detail in relation to how we relate to this imagery that Sangharakshita pointed out, that very often in the old texts you have people coming to see the Buddha, a big gathering, and somebody comes in and they do a full-length prostration. Somebody comes in and they bow. Somebody comes in and just sits down. And the Buddha doesn't, it's all fine. It doesn't bother the Buddha how people are, whether they bow, whether they don't bow, whether they prostrate. He's not concerned about that. And I think that's a very, very important detail, that when you come into the shrine room, you are free to relate to being here in whatever way you wish. I mean, obviously respect the space, because it's, you know, it's a space that people cherish and revere. But in terms of how you relate to the image, you've got to discover that for yourselves. If you're new to all this, you have to discover that. You know, you can't sort of force it, just because all the Buddhists here are been Buddhists for a long time, are bowing or prostrating, or whatever it might be. There's no pressure on you to do that. Nobody will mind. The Buddha won't mind. You have to be free to revere. I think that's very important, that you can't be forced to respect or revere anybody or anything. You have to discover the qualities before you can do that. And that's very important, I think. Yeah. Yes.
Follow up on that answer, actually. I thought that's really interesting what you said about turning enlightenment into a person. So when you read Buddha, for example, would you say that you revere Buddha as as a symbol of the historical Siddhartha Dharma, or would you say you revere him as a symbol of enlightenment? How would you relate to that?
I was trying to think what happens when I revere the Buddha. That's a very, very good question. In some ways, it's not easy to describe, I think. I mean, in a way, both of those are true. But I think when I'm really genuinely in a state of reverence, I think it generally tends to happen is when I'm sort of imagining what it would be like to be with the Buddha. Sometimes I can just sort of slip into a sort of mood or a state of, well, supposing I was, one of those people that was around the Buddha when he was teaching, what would it be like? What would it be like to be around that quality of mindfulness, that quality of loving kindness? How would I feel in relation to that? And so I suppose perhaps the best way to describe it is, the sort of feeling one might have of being around a very, very developed human being. And I mean, the closest I've had to that is being around Sangharakshita. The sort of a real presence, a human presence for sure, but a big presence, a mysterious presence, something, slightly bigger than the person even. So that's the sort of feeling, but it's not, I must really stress, this is very, very personal. You know, you can't sort of manufacture it, and you can't do it because other people are doing it. It's something that sort of, you know, in your Dharma practice, you know, you can feel it sometimes if you study the old texts, the earliest records, and perhaps you're in a really good study group with somebody and they're really bringing alive, say, a story from the life of the Buddha, you can begin to feel what it might be like. Yeah. I mean, some people, I mean, it's certainly not been my experience. Their first, you know, moment on the Buddhist path was seeing a Buddha image, you know, a particularly good Buddha image, and they're just stunned at the, you know, at the calm, at the steadiness, and it changes their life. And this has happened. I mean, people in the West, this has happened to. Yeah. Is that helpful? Yeah. I mean, I think perhaps there are, you know, talking about reverence. I mean, perhaps in the world of the arts, you get, you know, people having experiences of reverence when they hear, you know, particularly the sublime music. You know, I know friends of mine, when they hear Bach, they enter a sort of, they're not necessarily religious, but they enter a sort of religious state because the music is so profound, so sublime. I've known people wanting to prostrate to Michelangelo's David, you know, when they were in Italy, when they were in where is David? Is that in Florence? I can't remember where it is. They just found this just so awe-inspiring, you know, and they're not particularly religious people. I find that very interesting. So the aesthetic experience, I think, can do that. Nature, of course, you know, sometimes being in nature, the vastness of nature can do something to you, can't it? Not saying nature is enlightened or Michelangelo's David is enlightened or anything like that. It's just this sense of wonder, amazement, feeling awed by what you're encountering. Yeah. Was that another one that's gone? Or no? Okay.
I'm wondering if you think that if you cultivate it in a sort of, in a general way, like if I was cultivating or opening up to reverence in relation to music or nature or whatever, which isn't quite the same as doing it for the Buddha, but do you think that cultivating it in those other contexts then sort of will develop one's capacity for reverence in a more spiritual sense?
I would have thought so. I would have thought so. I mean, I if anything, I think it might have worked the other way for me, that sort of encountering, you know, the sort of, for want of a better word, the spiritually higher has made me more keenly aware and to value the sort of humanly higher, if you like. I think it's sort of worked that way round. And I think that the being in a state of vandana, a state of salutation, I think you become much more sensitive to the greatness around you, you know, wherever it manifests and whoever it manifests. And I think that's I'd love to be in that state all the time, you know, because it's really valuing and revering and elevating, I think, the world around you. Yeah. I remember meeting Dada Rinpoche, and I had the sense of somebody who had an incredible capacity for revering everything. I told this story the other day in a group that I had in India, when I was traveling in India, when I met Rinpoche. I just had these not very good photographs of tankers and Bante and things like that, you know, very poor reproductions of images of Tara and Padmasambhava and so on. But I took them with me because they were important. And I showed them to Rinpoche. I mean, why? I thought he'd be interested, I don't know. But he took hold of them. I mean, I'd sort of hand them over like that. He'd pick them up like this and put them to his head. And he was going, oh, and he used to rub his head like this, oh. And I gave them to him because I thought, well, he values them more than than I did. And it was incredible. I mean, these were sacred things. For me, they were kind of reproductions that would remind me of the Dharma. And I thought, well, it's not just to those things. This is somebody who reveres. You know, it's a highly developed capacity in him. Yeah.
There's something about reverence being a natural state then, something that's...
Well, I personally think it is. I think it's, I think there's something in human beings that wants to do it. You know, what Sangharakshita has a saying, faith is innate, doubt is acquired. And I think that you know, that we want, you know, I think as a kid, you know, I think children, they kind of look up, don't they? And then we bump into life and it gets sort of lost, doesn't it? So many disappointments and betrayals and all that sort of thing. And it's very easy, I think, then to sort of think, well, there's no point in doing that because you're going to get let down. And but I think, you know, in a way we've got to develop, I think the fact that if we have reverence for the transcendental, to use that language, you can't be let down. You can't be let down by people who you might respect and revere, and then they do things which sort of break that for you. You don't lose that sense of their goodness, if you like, even though they've erred, because there's something deeper in your reverence, for, you know, for that which will never let you down. That's the way I see it. Yeah.
Was it related to metta then in some way?
Well, Sangharakshita says in one place, which I find very helpful, that metta is the basic emotion, positive emotion. That when we were on a seminar with him once, and I was a bit surprised in this teaching of the Buddha, when the Buddha says in this particular teaching, when you go to see teachers, sort of more secular teachers, but maybe religious teachers, you go with metta. And I said, well, why not reverence and faith? And he said, but you don't know yet that they're worthy of reverence and faith. But you go with the attitude you're trying to cultivate to everybody, friendliness, metta, loving kindness. And if it turns out that through listening to them and being with them, you think, oh, well, actually, they've got something a bit more, that will naturally become reverence. That would be your loving kindness going up, as it were, to them. And I found that enormously helpful. Really, the baseline is always to be in touch with metta. And in a sense, you can let reverence just take care of itself, really. It will naturally turn into that. Yeah. Hang on. It's 8:35. It's time to end the question and answers. Is that right?
That's right.
Good. And now, are somebody else going to announce this now, or should I say it?
It's okay.
I've got a bit of faith.
But first of all, I just want to really thank Padmavajra for such an inspiring talk and for offering so generously to us the Dharma and his great love and affection for his teachers, for Sangharakshita and Sheffield Buddhist Centre. Thank you very much.